Imagine the clang of metal doors echoing through cold concrete halls, the smell of bleach and damp stone in the air. It's 2 a.m. in a maximum security prison built to keep even the most dangerous inmates locked away. Guards patrol in precise shifts, security cameras sweep every corner, and the walls rise higher than a 3-story building. Escape is supposed to be impossible. Yet on a quiet spring night, an 18-year-old girl proved everyone wrong. She wasn't a hardened criminal or a seasoned escape artist. Just months earlier, she'd been a normal teenager, laughing with friends, worrying about exams, dreaming of college. But a single impulsive decision and a twist of bad luck landed her behind bars, surrounded by people twice her age with far darker pasts. At first, she tried to adapt, telling herself she could survive her sentence if she kept her head down. But the prison world was nothing like she imagined. Every day tested her resolve. Guards barked orders without mercy. Inmates formed tight alliances and silent rivalries. Nights were the hardest. The clanging doors, the whispered threats, and the relentless feeling that her life was over before it had truly begun. Most people would break. She refused. Instead of surrendering to despair, she began to watch, to listen, to notice. When the guards grew lazy near shift changes, when a security camera's blind spot left a shadowed corner, when a particular gate lock seemed to jam, she remembered it all. What began as idle observation soon became a silent, dangerous plan. The idea was outrageous. A teenage girl slipping past multiple layers of steel and surveillance? Impossible. But each day she pieced together a mental map, testing tiny details and keeping her face blank so no one would suspect. Her motivation was more than freedom for freedom's sake. Maybe it was the injustice of her conviction, maybe a family crisis she couldn't ignore, maybe sheer survival instinct, but her determination hardened with every passing week. By the time spring arrived, she knew the prison's routines better than some of the guards themselves. And then came the night. While most inmates slept and the air hung heavy with silence, she made her move. What happened next would baffle seasoned officers, ignite headlines around the country, and turn her into a symbol of defiance. This is the incredible true story of how a young woman, barely old enough to vote, outsmarted a system designed to hold her forever. It's a story of grit, intelligence, and a will so fierce that not even concrete walls could contain it. How did she do it? How far was she willing to go? And what awaited her once she stepped beyond those prison gates? Stay with us as we unravel every calculated step of her escape, the moments of sheer luck, the razor-thin margins, and the unshakable courage of an 18-year-old who refused to be caged. Before she became a headline, before the escape that shocked the entire state, Emily Carter was just an ordinary small-town girl. Growing up in a quiet Midwest community, she loved sketching in her notebook, riding her bike along tree-lined streets, and staying up late watching crime dramas with her older brother. Teachers described her as bright but restless, a quick thinker who sometimes pushed limits just to see how far she could go. But her senior year of high school brought a storm of trouble. Her parents were going through a bitter divorce, the family home felt like a battlefield, and Emily started spending time with a new crowd. Among them was a charismatic 21-year-old named Kyle, who loved fast cars and carried a grin that promised excitement. Emily was drawn to his thrill-seeking attitude, a sharp contrast to the tension at home. One Friday night, Kyle convinced Emily to join him and 2 friends for what he called a quick run. Nothing serious, just a harmless prank, he said. But the prank wasn't harmless. Kyle planned to break into a local electronics store after hours. Emily hesitated but didn't want to look scared. She agreed to be the lookout, thinking it was just a bit of rebellious fun. The plan unraveled instantly. A silent alarm triggered as soon as Kyle forced the back door. Police cruisers arrived within minutes. The others fled through the alley. Emily froze. By the time officers found her crouched behind a trash bin, she was the only one they could arrest. In court, the story became even worse. Prosecutors argued she'd been part of the burglary scheme from the start. Kyle and the others vanished, leaving her to face the charges alone. Her public defender fought for leniency, but the judge, frustrated with a rise in break-ins and eager to make an example, handed down a sentence of 3 years in a state correctional facility. Emily's world collapsed overnight. One moment she was a teenager with college plans. The next, she was wearing a prison uniform, processed like an adult criminal. She would turn 18 behind bars. The intake process felt like stepping into another universe. Guards barked orders as they cataloged her belongings. The clang of metal doors echoed down endless gray corridors. Inmates with hard eyes sized her up as she passed, their stares a mixture of curiosity and quiet menace. Emily tried to swallow her fear, but her heart pounded so loud she could hear it over the heavy shuffle of prison boots. Letters from her mother offered comfort, but visits were rare. Kyle never contacted her. Nights were the hardest. Fluorescent lights buzzing, distant arguments echoing through concrete walls, the reality of years stretching ahead like an unending road. Somewhere between the first week and the first month, Emily made a decision. She wouldn't let this place define her. She wouldn't serve all 3 years. As loneliness sharpened her mind, the idea of escape, a wild, impossible thought, took root, and once it did, it refused to let go. Emily's first weeks inside Riverview State Correctional Facility were a brutal education in survival. The prison sat on a windswept hill far from town, its concrete walls stained by years of harsh winters. Every morning began the same way, the blare of the 5 a.m. alarm, a head count, and the metallic groan of doors sliding open. Guards shouted instructions, while the women filed into narrow corridors like soldiers on a forced march. The cell she shared with another inmate, a tough woman in her late 30s named Marlene, smelled of disinfectant and damp bedding. Marlene barely spoke at first, just a curt nod when Emily introduced herself. Over time, Emily learned that silence wasn't rudeness, it was strategy. In Riverview, talking too much could get you noticed, and being noticed often meant trouble. Meals were grim affairs. Grayish oatmeal for breakfast, watery stew for lunch, and mystery meat at dinner. The cafeteria buzzed with low, wary conversations, but the moment a guard clanged a baton against the railing, the room fell silent. Fights could break out over something as small as a wrong look or a seat in the corner. Emily kept her eyes down and her back to the wall. The worst part wasn't the food or the endless noise, it was the sense of being watched. Cameras tracked every hallway. Guards paced with bored eyes but quick tempers. Even in the yard, where inmates walked circles for exercise, Emily felt like a goldfish in a bowl, trapped under a constant gaze. But prison also had its rhythms, and Emily began to notice patterns. A certain guard, Officer Jenkins, always left his station 5 minutes early to smoke behind the laundry building. The security camera near the west stairwell had a tiny flicker every time it rotated, a brief blind spot lasting just a heartbeat. During shift changes, the corridors buzzed with confusion as guards checked rosters and keys exchanged hands. While other inmates killed time with card games or idle talk, Emily watched. She memorized guard routes, learned which doors were double-locked and which squeaked the least. She noted how the laundry delivery came every Thursday at exactly 2:15 p.m. and how the electrical room's padlock sometimes stuck when humidity rose. Marlene eventually warmed to her, offering quiet advice. "Keep your head down. Don't owe anyone favors," she said one night, her voice a whisper over the hum of fluorescent lights. But when Emily asked subtle questions about guard habits or escape rumors, Marlene just raised an eyebrow. "Kid, people dream about getting out. Dreaming's easy. Doing it? Different story." Emily never argued. She simply kept watching. Each tiny detail became a puzzle piece. She knew she couldn't rely on luck. She needed timing, precision, and absolute secrecy. Prison was meant to break her, but it sharpened her instead. By the time her 18th birthday passed with a single stale cupcake from the cafeteria, Emily had mapped Riverview in her mind like a chessboard. The idea of escape no longer felt like fantasy. It was becoming a plan waiting for its moment. By her 6th month inside Riverview, Emily's quiet observations had evolved into a meticulous strategy. What started as idle daydreams during long nights became a blueprint she replayed like a private movie. She never wrote anything down. Every detail lived only in her memory, safe from searches and suspicious eyes. The spark came during her weekly laundry duty. Inmates wheeled heavy carts of folded sheets through a service corridor that led to the back of the facility. The door there opened onto a walled loading dock where delivery trucks idled briefly before heading out to the main road. The space was small, almost forgotten, and during a chaotic shift change it was barely monitored. Emily noticed that the outer gate lock often jammed for a few seconds before clanking shut. That tiny flaw became the cornerstone of her escape dream. Step by step, she tested boundaries without drawing attention. She deliberately lagged behind when guards checked laundry carts, noting exactly how long it took for someone to notice. She memorized which officers smoked during late shifts and which lingered at the coffee machine. She even paid attention to weather forecasts. Rain and heavy winds meant guards hurried through their rounds and cameras blurred under droplets. To pull it off, she needed more than timing. She needed tools. Borrowing or stealing anything sharp would raise alarms, so Emily got creative. She befriended Rosa, an older inmate assigned to the prison workshop. From casual conversations about art and sketches, Emily learned that Rosa sometimes smuggled scrap metal for jewelry projects. One afternoon, Emily traded a handmade drawing for a thin piece of wire, claiming it was for craft work. In truth, it would help her jimmy a stubborn latch. Discipline was crucial. Emily hid her excitement beneath a mask of boredom, blending into the background. She followed rules to the letter, so guards saw her as compliant and harmless. Even Marlene, her cellmate, remained unaware. Emily knew that sharing her plan, even with someone she trusted, meant risking everything. Over weeks, she rehearsed every motion in her mind. Slipping from the laundry line during a Thursday delivery, timing her steps to the rhythm of guard rotations, using the wire to pop the service door's loose latch, and darting into the shadowed dock. From there, she'd squeeze between stacked crates, waiting for the truck gate to open. She had memorized the perimeter lighting pattern so she could stay hidden in the darkest corners. The hardest part was what came after. Where would she go once outside? Emily recalled childhood bike rides through nearby woods and studied the prison's faint smell of pine on windy days. That told her dense forest lay west, perfect cover. She plotted a zigzag route through back roads and creeks to a bus station 20 miles away. Every night before lights out, Emily silently repeated her checklist like a mantra. No paper, no accomplices, no second chances. She understood that a single misstep could mean solitary confinement or years added to her sentence. When Thursday, May 17th, finally appeared on the calendar, a night forecast for heavy rain, Emily felt a strange calm. Months of silent preparation had led to this. All she needed was nerve, timing, and the courage to risk everything for the taste of freedom. The night of May 17th arrived wrapped in thunderclouds, exactly as Emily had hoped. Rain lashed the prison walls, drumming against the corrugated metal roof and blurring the surveillance cameras in a misty haze. Lightning flashed across the yard, briefly illuminating the razor wire like jagged silver teeth. At 1:45 a.m., the dorm lights dimmed for final count. Emily lay still on her bunk, heart thudding like a drum beneath her thin blanket. She waited as the guard's footsteps echoed past the cell, 1, 2, 3, until the sound faded into the distant hum of generators. Marlene stirred, but didn't wake when Emily swung her legs silently to the floor. She wore 2 layers of dark clothing and soft-soled shoes she had scuffed to dull the squeak. The wire tool was taped beneath her sleeve, its cold edge pressing against her wrist as a reminder of the stakes. With a deep breath, she slipped from the cell during the narrow window when the block door unlocked for a scheduled maintenance pass. The corridor smelled of damp concrete and bleach. Far away, thunder rolled. Emily moved quickly, hugging the wall, timing each step to the flicker of the overhead lights. At the laundry station, she blended into the late-shift workers returning carts from a delayed delivery, an unexpected stroke of luck. The guards barely looked up as she fell in line, head down, shoulders squared. Her pulse spiked when she reached the service door. Just as she'd memorized, Officer Jenkins was gone, likely enjoying his smoke break behind the workshop. Emily crouched near the latch, pretending to tighten a cart strap. Rain hissed against the dock outside, masking the faint, metallic scrape as she slipped the wire into the lock. One twist. Another. A soft click. The door eased open, a gust of wet air washing over her. She pushed the cart forward, then silently stepped into the narrow loading bay. Shadows stretched long under the intermittent flash of lightning. Beyond the bay's outer gate lay the delivery trucks. And freedom. For 30 agonizing seconds, she waited behind a stack of supply crates, counting the rain's rhythm against the distant murmur of guards on shift change. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Then came the mechanical groan she'd prayed for, the outer gate rolling open to admit a returning laundry van. Emily darted through the gap, moving low and fast across slick concrete. The guard at the far checkpoint hunched beneath his hood, cursing the storm, his view obscured by rain. She slipped behind the van's shadow, then sprinted toward the western fence where runoff water pooled at the base. The final barrier loomed, tall steel mesh topped with razor wire, but just beyond, the forest swayed like a dark ocean. Emily climbed the maintenance ladder bolted to the fence post, hands numb and slick. Lightning flashed as she threw her jacket over the wire and swung her legs across. A sharp sting sliced her palm, but she didn't stop. When her feet hit muddy ground outside the perimeter, she didn't look back. The storm swallowed her silhouette as she vanished into the black woods, the prison alarm still silent behind her, like a cloak. Branches whipped her arms as she pushed through the undergrowth, the mud sucking at her shoes. Behind her, the prison remained eerily quiet. No sirens yet, no searchlights slicing through the trees. Each step away from those looming walls felt both unreal and urgent, as if the earth itself might pull her back if she slowed. She followed the route she'd rehearsed in her mind for months, west through the pines, then a jagged turn along a shallow creek that would hide her tracks. The cold water numbed her ankles but kept her trail invisible to dogs. Hours blurred into a rhythm of splash and stumble. Dawn crept across the horizon, pale and misty, as she reached an abandoned hunting cabin she'd spotted long ago on a childhood bike ride. Inside, Emily wrung out her soaked clothes and forced herself to rest. The silence was almost louder than the prison's constant clamor. For the first time in half a year, she breathed without walls around her. Yet freedom carried its own weight. She knew the manhunt would begin the moment guards discovered her empty bunk. By mid-morning, news bulletins blared across the state. 18-year-old escapes Riverview Correctional. Helicopters thumped overhead, and police checkpoints sprang up on rural roads. Emily stayed hidden, living on rainwater and a granola bar she'd pocketed days earlier. She traveled only at night, moving from woods to abandoned barns, hitching short rides from unsuspecting drivers when she could. For a week, she stayed one step ahead. Some said it was luck. Others called it cunning. But Emily knew it was preparation. Every creek, every shortcut etched in her mind from the long nights of planning. Eventually, she reached a bus station 2 towns away, where she blended into the crowd with her hood up and her wounded hand bandaged in a strip of t-shirt. What happened after remains partly a mystery. Some reports claim she made it to a distant city and started a new life under a different name. Others insist she quietly surrendered months later, exhausted and ready to face a new trial. Either way, Emily's story spread far beyond Riverview's walls. To some, she was a reckless criminal. To others, a symbol of unbreakable will. But one truth is undeniable. On a stormy May night, a determined 18-year-old outsmarted an entire prison system and proved that even the tallest walls can't cage a mindset on freedom.